My son is dead and you will return to your parents' house, right? We will live in this house. My dear husband suddenly left this world. Right after the funeral, my grieving self was visited by my in-laws. Although not many, this house is filled with memories of living with my husband. Why must I be the one to leave? Yet, without even a moment to wipe my eyes, my mother-in-law ruthlessly said those words. My name is Hannah. I am a clerk working in a real estate agency. The meeting with my dear husband, Brian, happened because of the real estate agency where I work. He was the brother of my male colleague, and the two of them got along very well and often visited since their workplaces were close. As a fellow clerk, I had become close friends with my colleague who would later become my brother-in-law. It was through him that I was introduced to his elder brother. Eventually, I was invited by the brothers to join them for lunch, and we began to spend more time together. I recognized Brian as a cheerful and nice person to talk to, but I hadn't considered him romantically. I thought he felt the same until one day, an event that would change our relationship occurred. We were supposed to meet at a restaurant booked by my colleague, but only he had an urgent matter and could not make it. It seemed a waste to cancel the reservation, so for the first time, we found ourselves alone together. I later learned that the brothers had planned this, with the younger brother arranging for us to be alone at the elder brother's request. The food was delicious, and as we talked, we quickly grew close, sharing our backgrounds and values. The more I learned about his character, the more I was drawn to his warm smile. This day marked a change in our relationship, and it didn't take long before we were married, thanks to the younger brother's arrangements. In that sense, I cannot thank him enough for what has transpired since. Then came the day we met with his parents. I was full of anxiety, but his parents welcomed me very gently. The caring exchange continued, and I began to relax. I'm really glad you came. We were looking forward to meeting you, Hannah. We made a lot of food hoping today would be a good day. My mother-in-law said this and took great care of us. My husband's parents, like their eldest son, were independent people and very easy to get along with. I felt relieved and grateful for the enjoyable time I had at my in-laws' house. Even after many interactions, my in-laws continued to support our happiness, maintaining a distance that did not impose marriage or children on us. Eventually, the topic of living together at my in-laws' house came up, but we had plans to build our own home. Actually, my grandfather left us a house. As I explained, my in-laws listened intently and nodded. My grandfather doted on me, his only granddaughter, and had even perfectly remodeled the home and land he left me before passing away. The land was nearby, and with redevelopment, the land value had soared. However, being in the real estate industry for a long time, I knew that selling the land would be more beneficial for our ideal home plans than living in it. Though I am grateful for my grandfather's love, he had said I could live in or sell the house, so we had already considered selling it. After getting married, we moved there. However, the distance from work and the desirability of the location made it difficult to continue living there. As we were planning to sell, a significant change came into our lives. My husband, a salesperson, was assigned a transfer. His company had branches nationwide, and he was deemed the only suitable candidate for the position, making it an order we could not refuse. I will definitely come back during the holidays. Also, my parents will visit. It's not necessary, but could you take them out? Both your father and mother are very nice people, so going out is no problem. But it seems like selling the house will have to wait. Because of my job, my husband's assignment was decided. It was sudden, but I had to endure the loneliness and worry, waiting for the day we could live together again. As my husband had said, on his days off, my in-laws, especially my mother-in-law, would often visit. My mother-in-law used to endure loneliness while raising young children during my father-in-law's business trips. You can still nurture family memories even without children. Let's go out together. Shopping might cheer you up. Let's go, Hannah. Thanks to my mother-in-law, I didn't feel lonely, and my holidays became busy. However, gradually, I began to notice something concerning. Almost every day off from work, my mother-in-law would invite me out. That was fine, but after a month, her invitations became somewhat forceful, disregarding my fatigue and household chores. I wanted to rest this week. When I said this, my mother-in-law frowned as if I were being unreasonable. But it's fun to go out together, isn't it? Or are you saying you don't want to go out with me? It's not like that. But you take me out every week, so don't you think you need a break too, Mother? My mother-in-law's face turns sad. I try to clear up the misunderstanding in a hurry, but she refuses to listen. Confused, I agree, and then she suddenly smiles as if she had forgotten how persistently she had clung to me. My suspicions about my mother-in-law's actions grow inside me. The places she forces me to go always end up being expensive. Shopping at brand stores and eating at expensive restaurants continues, and she manipulates it so that I have to pay. Often, she leaves the store first, and I am left to pay. There is no thanks for the payment, nor any offer to pay later. Certainly, having a house and earning a good salary means I don't have to worry about savings. However, my husband and I have always been frugal, so I can't help but feel uneasy about my mother-in-law's lavish behavior. There were times when both in-laws were present, but even then, the situation was the same. If anything, my father-in-law joining in only added to my burden. I knew it needed to be addressed, but it was hard to talk to my husband about it. He had said he would definitely come back on holidays. But his workplace was quite busy, and he couldn't come home easily. Your mother told me you go out every week, but is everything going smoothly? It doesn't seem like you have any worries? When I video call my husband, his under-eye bags and slightly thinner cheeks are noticeable. The fatigue from work is clearly visible. I feel guilty even mentioning the issue with my mother-in-law, so I end up pretending everything is fine. Your mother has been really good to me. Take care of yourself too, Brian. I'm fine, so don't worry. I deceive my husband while I can't refuse to cover the expenses of socializing with my in-laws. However, their behavior gradually escalates, and when I insist, I can't go out today, they start asking for this. Then, hey, could you lend me some money just for a little while? Huh? I have to pay? Just a little, really just a bit. I've already made a reservation at the restaurant. I'll take some other friends instead, so could you cover what I don't have? I wanted to refuse, but doing so would complicate the conversation, leading nowhere. Resigned, I opened my wallet. But I never showed such an attitude in front of my husband. Maybe you should ask Brian? When I subtly probed my mother-in-law, I was surprised by her response. It's shameful to ask Brian. She thinks it's embarrassing to ask her eldest son, so it's better to ask his wife for money. I had long given up on my mother-in-law, and it became a daily occurrence for her to ask for money. At least if I give her some pocket money, she stops forcing me out. I knew this had turned into a significant problem. But the inability to talk with my mother-in-law had left me utterly exhausted. My mother-in-law's actions became increasingly inexplicable and odd. She would show up unannounced and survey the inside and outside of the house as if she were invading my privacy. Is this decor left by your grandfather, Hannah? It's marvelous to have the luxury to furnish such high-end items. Some of the furniture included antiques my grandfather had liked. My mother-in-law seemed to enjoy them, coming over to gaze at them dreamily as if they were her own. This is my and my husband's house. I finally began to consider opening up about my mother-in-law's behavior. My husband might be surprised, but it would be so much better if we could figure out how to handle her together. Her actions were never pleasant. As much as we are in-laws, it's an invasion of privacy. However, just as I was dealing with this, the duration of my husband's assignment was determined. Just a little more patience, and he would be back, and hopefully, the in-laws asking for money would end, a faint hope sprouting in my heart. My husband is working hard every day, so my patience would last a little longer. I was looking forward to reuniting with my husband, but the situation took an unexpected turn. What? Brian has collapsed and is in the hospital? My mind goes blank. The call came from a colleague at his assignment location, and I rushed to the hospital. Maybe it was the strain of his busy schedule, but suddenly, he had a heart attack. Brian was transported by ambulance, but it was too late, and my healthy and kind husband unexpectedly passed away. I couldn't accept the reality as I faced the funeral. I don't remember much due to the overwhelming grief. My brother-in-law rushed over, and he took care of most of the arrangements. I'm sorry. You've just lost your brother, and yet you're helping so much. It's my brother's funeral, so it's natural to help. By the way, is everything okay with the land? Is the house ready? As the funeral was winding down, I talked with my brother-in-law while cleaning up. I nodded and replied, "It's all set." And a few days after my husband's funeral, my in-laws came to the house together. However, it was clear they were not there to console me. It's a pity about our son's sudden passing, but we are here, so don't worry. My mother-in-law's face was oddly grinning. Even more astonishing, she had arranged a truck, which was packed full with furniture and other items from her home. I was too shocked and confused to speak. This doesn't look like a simple move. My mother-in-law and her husband are trying to move in without any discussion. What is making them do this? But the answer is clear. Could it be that you're after our land? Despite the confusion, I voice a concern that has always been in my heart. My mother-in-law gave a cold smirk. The land value has really shot up. I've been targeting this house for a long time. In fact, you only got married to my son because of this inheritance. I allowed the marriage because you were the one who inherited it. Filled with despair, I am at a loss for words. Are you saying that you and I will live together? What? What nonsense are you talking about? I ask this amidst the confusion, and my mother-in-law raises her eyebrows. Brian's death was unexpected, but actually, even if it hadn't happened, my mother-in-law intended to take this house. The in-laws planned to oust me and take over the land. And they assumed I would just leave the house. My son is dead and you will return to your parents' house, right? It would be a shame for this house to be empty, so we will live in it. That's why I'm telling you not to worry. My mother-in-law's smile twists into a sinister grin. Despite my fear, I point out her mistake. The house has already been sold though. I hold back my laughter at my mother-in-law's misunderstanding, but I can't hide my half-smile. In response, my mother-in-law freezes and says, "What?" Just then, a moving truck from a different company arrives. I'm sorry, but we're here to move things into your house. Because a truck from another company is already parked there, a sturdy mover gets out to check with us. The movers my mother-in-law had arranged also descend. Realizing something is amiss as work cannot begin due to the other truck's presence, they start asking the in-laws for an explanation, but both are too flustered to provide a clear answer. Arguing with everyone here would be pointless. Seeing the in-laws in a panic, I finally start to regain my composure. I then promptly instruct them to move the truck. This house already has a buyer and the contract is complete. A new family will be moving in, so you can't just bring these people's stuff into someone else's home, right? As the movers are shocked by the situation, a luxury car arrives. Out step a wealthy couple and their children. In fact, this land is no longer mine. They are the new owners. The in-laws grow even more confused, unable to understand what is happening. Please move the truck quickly, the new residents can't start their work. Once I manage to get the mother-in-law's truck moved, the movers begin working swiftly, carrying in brand new furniture according to planned procedures. My mother-in-law and her husband, unable to accept this, start pestering me at the entrance. When the buyer, the husband, sees his family to the car and comes over to confront us, a different chaos ensues. Who are these people? We bought this house. Please send the truck back soon. I hadn't expected the in-laws to visit, so I apologize profusely and somehow appease the buyer. But the mother-in-law and her husband don't leave. Instead, they push past us and rush into the house. Of course, the inside of the house has completely changed from what they knew. None of the furniture my husband and I used remains. My mother-in-law is shocked by the sight and begins to create a scene. What is this? The house is empty. The antique furniture and lighting. I love those. What's going on here? She can't comprehend what has happened and is outraged. When the new residents finally shout, "We will call the police," my father-in-law, who had been flustered, bolts and drags my mother-in-law away. As they move a bit away from the scene, the heated mother-in-law gradually becomes dazed and quiets down. I first apologized to the new residents. Told that future problems could still arise, I take down the names and addresses of the in-laws to somehow secure release. Though weighed down by a strong sense of fatigue, I still have to explain things to the in-laws. I return to them and calmly inform them that the move had been completed a few days before my husband passed away. This house was originally planned to be sold with the land, so everything is according to the initial plan. There was a pause in our plans due to my husband's assignment. But a certain background allowed us to proceed smoothly with the discussion. The person who supported our decision was my brother-in-law. I was bewildered by the change in my in-laws, who had started asking me for money, but I didn't want to worry my husband and couldn't talk about it, continuing to brood. My brother-in-law noticed this and came to my rescue. He doesn't get along well with our in-laws and had told me that he would help if there was any trouble. Wanting neither to spoil my relationship with my husband nor with the in-laws, I trusted my brother-in-law, who promised to keep things confidential, and decided to consult him fully. When I told him everything, he was furious with the in-laws. As my husband's brother and a colleague at my workplace, he understood the in-laws' schemes well. For him, his brother Brian was his only family, and he said that I was like family too. I think our parents will eventually try to live in that house or conveniently kick us out to take it for themselves. My brother-in-law says that both my in-laws have such high-end tastes that they are naive about the ways of the world. They are vain and unscrupulous. Especially my mother-in-law, she acts like a lovely lady as long as she looks good on the outside, but in reality, she is mean-spirited and only thinks of herself. Because they are blood-related, the stories my brother-in-law tells about the in-laws are quite intense. They pretend to be something they're not in front of their eldest son, so my husband probably never knew this side of his parents. Anyway, he suggested that we sell the land early so it wouldn't be taken by my in-laws. I agreed with my brother-in-law's opinion and decided to proceed with the sale. Even though it was something important left by my dear grandfather, I wanted to avoid having the existence of this house become a problem for us as a couple. In fact, because it was important, I didn't want to leave any troubles behind. Of course, it wasn't a decision I made on my own. I had discussed it with my husband while he was alive, and he agreed. At that time, he became aware of all the actions of his parents. I didn't want to tell him, but I couldn't complete the sale on my own. However, he understood the feelings I couldn't consult him about, and he couldn't forgive his parents' actions. I'm sorry I didn't notice. If it's okay with you, Hannah, let's complete the sale before my parents can make a move. I'm sorry that it's such an important house inherited from your grandfather. No. If it's going to cause trouble, my grandfather would agree to let it go. I decided to sell the land not because of the relationship with my in-laws, but to protect the future with my husband. Regarding the sale, my brother-in-law, who is an expert in real estate, worked hard to find the best buyer. What I needed to do was to find a new place to move to as soon as possible and act naturally so as not to alert my in-laws. The house had some signs of use because we had lived there, but it was practically new, which helped keep the price down. This allowed us to find a buyer quickly, and the sale was completed smoothly. That was the family that arrived earlier. I was supposed to wait in our new house for Brian's return. He was happy about the sale, which was the only regret. As the movers efficiently carried in the furniture, the ousted in-laws watched the moving process proceed steadily. They stood dumbfounded without making any noise, but they couldn't stay like that forever. The movers that the in-laws had hired came up furiously demanding an explanation. From their perspective, it was an inexplicable error that caused a double booking of movers. I can't believe this is happening. This is a breach of contract. They confronted the in-laws, but they fumbled and couldn't provide a clear explanation. Eventually, the household goods had to be taken back, and it seems they were charged a significant extra fee due to the unforeseen circumstances. Finally grasping the situation, my mother-in-law trembled and clung to me. "This is the house of the eldest son's wife, so it's our house, right? This is strange, isn't it?" She tried to persuade me with strained excuses, but I ignored them and left with only my hand luggage. The land already belonged to the new family, and it wasn't mine anymore, so I had nothing to answer. The memorial service for my husband went smoothly. Although I saw my in-laws there, they seemed like they wanted to say something about the house to me, but in the end, they couldn't and just slinked away. Since I no longer had any obligation to communicate with them, we hardly spoke as there was no reason to. I spend my days peacefully, facing the sorrow of losing my husband in the small house we were supposed to restart our lives in as a couple. Although I had a substantial amount of savings from the sale, without Brian, plans for building our own home were extinguished. Returning to work, I immerse myself in the few memories I have of my husband, gradually trying to look forward and rediscover myself. Meanwhile, my in-laws, especially my mother-in-law, must have been accumulating frustrated dissatisfaction. I didn't want any more to do with her, so I hadn't informed her of my new address. Unable to interact with me, that seemed to increase her dissatisfaction. She had put on airs in front of her eldest son and couldn't go to her other son, whom she didn't get along with, and now she didn't even know where I was. The stress continued to build, and eventually, my mother-in-law lost her balance. One night, she attempted a heinous act of pouring gasoline around the house that had been sold. Fortunately, a passing neighbor found it suspicious and restrained her immediately, preventing any incident. When the police were called, they found she had prepared things like old papers and lighters, and she was arrested on suspicion of attempted arson. The owner of the house, realizing it was the woman who had shown up on the moving day, was extremely upset and contacted me to definitely prosecute. I apologized repeatedly, but it was an apology for the terrifying experience of nearly having the house set on fire, and there was nothing I could do about my mother-in-law's attempted arson. In the end, the case against my mother-in-law, who was obsessed with the house, could not be dismissed. I also managed to get forgiveness by apologizing repeatedly and promised that such an incident would never happen again. My mother-in-law, raised in luxury and used to getting whatever she wanted, became frustrated when she couldn't have the house as she desired, leading to twisted jealousy. She came to resent the house and the land, committed a crime, and eventually ended up in prison. My father-in-law, who should have been supportive, used her arrest as an excuse to argue incessantly and forcefully divorced her. So, even when her sentence is up, she has completely lost a home to return to. But that is the result of her chosen actions. My brother-in-law, feeling lonely after losing his brother, encourages me, saying, "I can bear it because I have a sister-in-law." Although the ties with my in-laws were successfully severed, I haven't lost all family. For the sake of my husband watching over me from heaven, I've decided to spend peaceful days.
I never thought a simple email would be the thing to unravel my entire life. But there it was, glowing on my husband's laptop screen at 2 a.m., while I was just trying to print out worksheets for my students. My name is Harper, and until last night, I thought I had the kind of marriage other people envied. The kind where you finish each other's sentences and still laugh at inside jokes from your first date. Ethan and I had been together for 8 years, married for 5 of those. He was the guy who brought me coffee in bed every Sunday morning and never forgot to kiss me goodbye, even when he was running late for work. Your flight confirmation for the Chicago conference next week, the email subject line read. Nothing unusual there, Ethan traveled frequently for work. But something made me pause. Maybe it was the way he'd been guarding his phone lately, or how he'd started working later and later. I clicked the email. The confirmation showed 2 seats. First class. I felt my stomach drop as I scrolled down and saw the hotel reservation. 1 room, king bed, 5 nights at the Drake Hotel. The booking was under Mr. and Mrs. Ellis, but I definitely wasn't the Mrs. Ellis going to Chicago. My hands were shaking as I opened his sent folder. Dozens of emails to someone named Vanessa Reed. The most recent one made me feel like I'd been punched in the gut. Can't wait to hold you again. These stolen moments aren't enough anymore. I heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly closed the laptop. Ethan appeared in the doorway of our home office, his hair messed up from sleep. Everything okay, babe? It's late, he said, rubbing his eyes. I forced a smile. Just printing some things for tomorrow's class. My voice sounded strange, too high-pitched. Go back to bed. He nodded, stifling a yawn. Don't stay up too late. Love you. Love you too, I replied automatically, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. After he left, I sat there in the dark, trying to make sense of it all. The Ethan I knew wouldn't do this. The Ethan I married wouldn't. But then again, maybe I didn't know him as well as I thought. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to my sister Chloe, then deleted it. What would I even say? Hey, guess what? Your brother-in-law's cheating on me with someone named Vanessa. It felt too raw, too real to put into words yet. Instead, I went through the motions of printing my worksheets. My students were counting on these for tomorrow's lesson on Romeo and Juliet. The irony wasn't lost on me, teaching teenagers about love and betrayal while my own marriage was apparently nothing but a carefully crafted lie. As I gathered my papers, a new email notification popped up on Ethan's laptop. From Vanessa Reed, missing you already. Dinner was perfect tonight. Tonight. While I'd been grading papers and making dinner for one because Ethan had texted that he was stuck in a late meeting, he'd been with her. I closed the laptop and went upstairs to our bedroom. Ethan was already asleep, looking peaceful and innocent. I stood there watching him breathe, remembering how just yesterday I would have crawled into bed and curled up against him without a second thought. Now I couldn't bear to touch him. I grabbed my pillow and headed to the guest room, my mind racing with questions. How long had this been going on? Who was Vanessa Reed? And most importantly, what was I going to do about it? One thing was certain, Ethan's perfect little world was about to come crashing down. He just didn't know it yet. I made it through exactly 3 classes before breaking down in the faculty bathroom. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely text Chloe, "Need you. Can you meet for lunch?" The morning had been a blur of trying to act normal while my students discussed the tragic romance of Romeo and Juliet. Every time I heard the word love, I felt like throwing up. When Lucas, my colleague who taught in the classroom next door, asked if I was okay, I barely managed a nod. Chloe was already waiting at our usual cafe when I arrived. One look at my face and she knew something was wrong. "Harper, you look like hell. What happened?" I opened my mouth to tell her, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots I'd taken of Ethan's emails. "That son of a bitch," Chloe whispered, her face darkening as she scrolled. "How long have you known?" "Found out last night." My voice cracked. "He's taking her to Chicago next week. 5 days at the Drake Hotel. On your anniversary weekend?" Chloe's knuckles went white around her coffee cup. I'll kill him. The worst part is, he's acting completely normal. Made me breakfast this morning, kissed me goodbye like nothing's wrong. I stabbed at my untouched salad. I don't even know who he is anymore. Have you Googled her? Chloe asked, already typing on her phone. Vanessa Reed. Oh. Oh wow. What? She turned her phone toward me. There she was, young, gorgeous, smiling confidently in her corporate headshot. Vice President of Marketing at Ethan's company. My stomach lurched. She's everything I'm not, I said quietly. Stop that right now, Chloe snapped. You're smart, successful, and way too good for him. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan, having dinner with clients tonight. Don't wait up. Chloe read the message over my shoulder and swore. Clients. Right. Want me to follow him? No, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice was. I have a better idea. That evening, I drove to Ethan's office building and parked where I could see the entrance. At 6:30, I watched him walk out with Vanessa. They weren't touching, but the way they looked at each other made my chest ache. I followed their car to an upscale restaurant across town. Through the window, I could see them at a corner table. No other clients in sight. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand, the same way he used to hold mine. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Ethan, meeting running late. Might grab drinks after. I took a picture of them through the window and sat there, staring at it. Part of me wanted to burst in and create a scene. Instead, I drove home and did something worse. I acted normal. I left his dinner in the oven, graded papers at the kitchen table, and waited. He came home at 11, smelling of expensive wine and wearing guilt like cologne. Sorry I'm so late, he said, kissing my cheek. These clients are demanding. That's okay, I replied, gathering my papers. How was the restaurant? He froze for a split second, so brief anyone else might have missed it. What restaurant? The one where you had your meeting. I kept my voice casual. I drove by on my way to pick up groceries. Looked nice. Another pause. Oh, right. Yeah, it was good. I headed upstairs, leaving him standing in the kitchen. In our bedroom, I opened his closet and found the shirt he'd worn to work that morning. There was a smudge of red lipstick on the collar. Vanessa had been wearing red lipstick at dinner. I carefully hung the shirt back up and got into bed, my mind racing with possibilities. Ethan thought he was so clever, living his double life. But he had no idea what was coming. Tomorrow, I decided, I would start making some plans of my own. The credit card statement arrived 3 days before Ethan's planned trip to Chicago. I wasn't supposed to see it, he usually handled all the bills online, but this one came in the mail by mistake. Sitting at our kitchen table, I stared at charge after charge that told the story of his other life. Dinner for two at places we'd never been. A jewelry store purchase from last month, probably explaining the bracelet I'd spotted on Vanessa's wrist at the restaurant. Hotel charges from business trips that now made perfect sense. My hands were steady as I laid out the evidence on the table, the credit card statement, screenshots of emails, photos from the restaurant. Then I waited. When Ethan came home, he was humming. Actually humming. He stopped dead when he saw me sitting there. We need to talk about your upcoming anniversary trip to Chicago, I said quietly. His face did something complicated, surprise, fear, then smooth confidence. What are you talking about? Don't. I pushed the evidence toward him. Just don't. He glanced at the papers, then at me, like a chess player calculating his next move. Harper, I can explain. Explain what? How you've been fucking your vice president of marketing. Or how you've been spending our money taking her to 5-star hotels. It's not what you think. Really? I laughed, and it sounded strange even to my ears. Because I think you're planning to spend our anniversary weekend with another woman. Please, tell me how I'm misinterpreting that. He sat down heavily, running his hands through his hair. You've been so distant lately, always focused on your students, your lesson plans. When was the last time you actually paid attention to me? The audacity of his words hit me like a physical blow. So this is my fault? I didn't say that. He reached for my hand. I pulled away. But relationships are a two-way street. Vanessa. She sees me. She understands the pressure I'm under. And I don't. I've supported you through every promotion, every late night, every weekend working. I've built my entire life around you. That's the problem. He stood up, pacing. You've lost yourself in being my wife. You used to be fun, spontaneous. Now it's all about your work, your routine. I felt something snap inside me. My work? I'm a teacher, Ethan. I shape young minds. What exactly do you do that's so important? Push papers and apparently your coworkers? His face darkened. See? This is exactly why. Why what? Why you couldn't keep it in your pants? Why you had to destroy our marriage? It's not destroyed unless you make it that way, he said, his voice softening. We can work through this. I'll end it with Vanessa. We can go to counseling. I stared at him, really seeing him for the first time. This man who could stand there, offering to fix things like he'd dented my car instead of shattering my entire world. When did you stop loving me? I asked. I never. Because I stopped loving you about 2 minutes ago. The words came out calm, certain. When you tried to blame me for your choices. He reached for me again. Baby, please. I stepped back. Don't call me that. Don't touch me. In fact, don't come home tonight. Or tomorrow. I need time to think. This is my house too, he protested. The house that my inheritance helped buy? The one that's in both our names? Yeah, we'll see about that. Something ugly flashed across his face. You're being hysterical. Let's talk about this when you've calmed down. I am calm, I said, and I was. Eerily calm. But you should know, I sent copies of everything to my lawyer this morning. Just in case you were thinking of doing any creative accounting before your trip. He went pale. You're bluffing. I picked up my phone, showed him the email confirmation from the law firm. Enjoy Chicago, Ethan. I hope she's worth it. As I walked upstairs, I heard him calling after me, his voice tinged with panic. But I didn't turn around. Instead, I went to our bedroom and started packing his bags. The time for tears was over. Now it was time for war. The 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test felt like a cosmic joke. I sat on the bathroom floor of my sister's guest house, where I'd been staying for the past week. Staring at the little window that had just complicated everything. 3 tests. All positive. A knock on the door made me jump. Harper? You've been in there for 20 minutes, Chloe called out. I opened the door and wordlessly held up the tests. Chloe's eyes widened. Oh shit, she whispered. Are you sure? As sure as 3 different brands can make me. She sat down next to me on the bathroom floor. What are you going to do? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Jenna, having dinner with Ethan tonight. He's a mess. Says you're not answering his calls. What's going on? My stomach lurched, and not just from the morning sickness I now realized I'd been ignoring. Jenna, my supposed best friend, who'd introduced me to Ethan 8 years ago, was having dinner with him? Unbelievable, Chloe muttered, reading over my shoulder. Want me to tell her what her precious Ethan's been up to? No. I stood up, suddenly energized by anger. I'll do it myself. An hour later, I walked into the restaurant where Jenna had tagged herself on Instagram. They were sitting in a corner booth, their heads close together. Ethan's hand was on Jenna's arm. "Well, isn't this cozy?" I said, approaching their table. They jumped apart like guilty teenagers. Jenna's face flushed red. "Harper. I was just trying to convince me to take him back." I pulled out my phone and showed her the photo of Ethan and Vanessa at dinner. "Did he tell you about her? Or about the Chicago trip he's planning for their romantic getaway?" Jenna's face crumpled. "He said you were being paranoid. That you were making things up because you were jealous of his success." "Of course he did." I turned to Ethan. "You're good at that, aren't you? Spinning stories, making people believe whatever version of reality suits you best." "Harper, please," Ethan stood up, reaching for me. "Let's talk about this privately. Like how you privately discussed our marriage with Jenna. Or how you privately planned your affair with Vanessa." Other diners were starting to stare. Ethan's jaw tightened. "You're making a scene," he hissed. "No, you made the scene when you decided to destroy our marriage." I felt oddly calm, even as my world was imploding again. "By the way, Jenna, you should know, he's been using the engagement ring fund we've been saving for your brother to pay for hotels with Vanessa." Jenna gasped. Her brother and his girlfriend had been waiting months for Ethan to make good on his promise to help them buy a ring. "Is that true?" she demanded. Ethan's silence was answer enough. "I trusted you," Jenna whispered, gathering her things. "I defended you to Harper. God, I'm such an idiot." She rushed past me, tears in her eyes. Ethan watched her go, then turned to me with fury in his eyes. "Happy now? You've ruined everything." "No, you did that all by yourself." I placed my wedding ring on the table. "I'll have my lawyer contact yours about the divorce." "Harper, wait." His voice softened, became pleading. "We can fix this. Whatever you want, counseling, a fresh start, anything." For a moment, my hand drifted to my stomach. Should I tell him? Would it make a difference? But then I remembered how he'd blamed me for his choices, how easily he'd lied to everyone we knew. "The thing is, Ethan, I don't want to fix this anymore. I want to be free of it. Of you." I walked out of the restaurant into the cool evening air, leaving him calling after me. My phone was already buzzing with messages, probably Jenna, maybe Ethan, possibly even Chloe checking on me. I ignored them all and drove to the drugstore instead. I needed prenatal vitamins. Whatever happened next, I had more than just myself to think about now. And I was done letting Ethan Ellis determine my future. The ultrasound screen showed a tiny flickering heartbeat. 8 weeks along, the technician said. I'd asked for the first appointment of the day, hoping to avoid running into anyone I knew at the hospital. "Would you like a picture to take home?" she asked. I nodded, thinking about the baby book my mother had kept for me, filled with ultrasound photos and milestone markers. This child's book would be different. No proud father smiling in the pictures, no joint announcements to family and friends. Lucas was waiting in the hospital cafe when I came down. He'd insisted on driving me after finding me throwing up in the faculty bathroom yesterday. "Everything okay?" he asked, sliding me a ginger tea. "Yeah, it's..." I pulled out the ultrasound photo, then quickly tucked it away as I spotted a familiar figure approaching, Vanessa Reed. Wearing a designer suit and a concerned expression that looked rehearsed. "Harper," she said, stopping at our table. "I'm glad I ran into you. We should talk." Lucas started to stand, but I grabbed his arm. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of my friend." She sat down uninvited, folding her manicured hands on the table. "Ethan's a mess. He's not eating, barely sleeping. This situation is affecting his work." "That must be inconvenient for you," I said, fighting another wave of nausea. "He loves you," she insisted. "What we had. It was a mistake. We've ended it." "When? Before or after I caught you?" She had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I know you're hurt, but..." No, I cut her off. You don't know anything about me. Just like you don't know anything about love. Love doesn't book hotel rooms behind someone's back. Love doesn't destroy families for fun. It wasn't like that, she protested. We never meant to. To get caught? I stood up, my chair scraping loudly. Tell Ethan if he wants to discuss anything, he can talk to my lawyer. And Vanessa? That promotion you're up for? Good luck explaining the company's morality clause to the board. Her face went pale. You wouldn't. Try me. She hurried away, her heels clicking on the hospital floor. Lucas whistled low. Remind me never to get on your bad side, he said. I made it 3 steps before the dizziness hit. Lucas caught me as my knees buckled. I need to sit down, I mumbled. You need to eat something, he corrected, flagging down a nurse. 20 minutes later, I was back in an exam room, hooked up to N4 for dehydration. The doctor was frowning at my chart. Your blood pressure's concerning, she said. Have you been under unusual stress lately? I laughed until tears came. You could say that. Well, whatever it is, it needs to stop. This pregnancy is high risk now. You need rest, regular meals, and absolutely no drama. No drama. Right. I was about to text Chloe when my phone lit up with a message from Ethan. We need to talk. Coming to Chloe's tonight. Important. Don't do it, Lucas said, reading over my shoulder. Whatever he wants to say, it can wait. No, I said, touching the ultrasound photo in my pocket. It's time he knew. All of it. That evening, I sat in Chloe's living room, the ultrasound photo on the coffee table between us. Ethan stared at it, his face unreadable. Is this some kind of joke? He finally asked. Funny, I was about to ask you the same thing about our marriage. A baby won't fix this, Harper. I'm not trying to fix anything. I'm telling you because you have a right to know. What you do with that information is up to you. He stood up, running his hands through his hair. I can't deal with this right now. I have the Chicago trip, the merger. And Vanessa? I asked quietly. His silence was deafening. Get out, I whispered. Harper. Get out. As the door slammed behind him, I felt something inside me break. But this time, it wasn't my heart. It was the last thread of hope that the man I married still existed somewhere inside the stranger he'd become. The morning Ethan was supposed to leave for Chicago, I woke up to find my bank accounts frozen. All of them. Even my personal savings account from before our marriage. He's trying to force you to talk to him, Chloe said when I called her, panic rising in my throat. Don't give in. But I had bills to pay, prenatal vitamins to buy, and a lawyer who needed her retainer. I had no choice. I agreed to meet Ethan at our house, our former house. Walking in felt like stepping into a museum of my previous life. Family photos still hung on the walls, my coffee mug still sat by the kitchen sink, everything perfectly preserved like the moment I'd left. Ethan was waiting in the living room, looking immaculate in his business suit. You're late. You're a bastard. I remained standing. Unfreeze the accounts. After we talk. He gestured to the couch. Please sit. I'll stand. Fine. He loosened his tie. I'd been thinking about the baby. Don't. We could try again, he continued as if I hadn't spoken. Marriage counseling, a fresh start. I'll cancel the Chicago trip. Too late. I already sent the board of directors proof of your affair with a subordinate. His face darkened. You what? They're reviewing it this morning. Probably why your phone's been buzzing for the last 5 minutes. He grabbed his phone, color draining from his face as he read the messages. Do you have any idea what you've done? Exactly what you taught me to do, protect myself. By destroying my career? He stood up, hands clenched. I built that company from nothing. And I built a life with you from nothing. Guess we're both losing things we care about. His laugh was ugly. You think you're so clever? You have no idea what I'm capable of. Actually, I do. I pulled out my phone, showed him the screen. I'm recording this conversation. Every threat, every attempt at manipulation. My lawyer's going to love it. Your lawyer can't help you if you can't pay her. He stepped closer. How long can you last without access to your money, Harper? A week? A month? How long can you last without your reputation? I countered. The board knows everything, the affair, the misused company funds, the fake expense reports. Even that business trip to Vegas that was actually a weekend with Vanessa. His hand shot out, gripping my arm. You vindictive bitch. Let go of me. My voice shook, but I held my ground. Or I'll add assault to the restraining order I'm filing tomorrow. The front door opened. Lucas stepped in, followed by Chloe. Everything okay in here? Lucas asked, his tone making it clear it wasn't really a question. Ethan released my arm, straightening his suit. We're fine. Just having a private conversation. Not anymore, Chloe said, moving to my side. Harper? I nodded, suddenly exhausted. We're done here. No, Ethan said, desperation creeping into his voice. We're not done until. His phone rang. He glanced at it, swore, and answered. I could hear raised voices on the other end. While he was distracted, Lucas guided me toward the door. But Ethan's next words stopped me cold. What do you mean, suspended pending investigation? This is ridiculous, she's lying about everything. The pregnancy, the affair, all of it. The room spun. I grabbed Lucas's arm for support. What did you just say? I turned back to Ethan. He covered the phone. You heard me. You think you're the only one who can play dirty? I told the board you're mentally unstable, making up stories because I asked for a divorce. Including this convenient pregnancy. The pain started low in my abdomen, sharp and insistent. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision. Harper? Chloe's voice seemed far away. You're bleeding. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was Ethan's face. Watching me fall with the same cold detachment he'd shown when I told him about our baby. Some things, I realized as consciousness slipped away, you can never take back. And some betrayals cut too deep to ever heal. The hospital room was too bright, too sterile. I woke to the steady beep of monitors and Chloe asleep in a chair beside me. My hands immediately went to my stomach. The baby's stable, a nurse said, appearing at my bedside. But you're on strict bed rest. No more stress. I almost laughed. No more stress. Right. There's someone insisting on seeing you, she continued. Your husband? We can send him away if you prefer. Before I could answer, Ethan appeared in the doorway. He looked wrecked, tie gone, shirt wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. Chloe jerked awake. Get out. Please, he said, his voice rough. 5 minutes. I nodded to Chloe. She squeezed my hand and left, but not before shooting Ethan a look that could have melted steel. He approached the bed slowly, like I was a wounded animal that might bolt. The doctor showed me the ultrasound. Now you believe me? Harper, He sat heavily in the chair. When they rushed you into emergency, there was so much blood. I thought. I realized. That I wasn't lying. My voice was steady, despite the tears threatening to fall. That maybe I wasn't the crazy, vindictive wife you painted me as to save your precious career? I got the call while you were in surgery. The board voted unanimously. I'm out. He laughed hollowly. Funny how none of that seems important anymore. Don't. I turned away. Don't pretend you've suddenly grown a conscience. It's not pretense. Seeing you collapse, knowing I caused this. He reached for my hand. I pulled away. You didn't just cause this, Ethan. You chose it. Every lie, every night with her, every attempt to destroy me, those were choices. I know. And I'm sorry. Please, let me try to make it right. For you, for the baby. There is no more us, I cut him off. The man I married died the moment he chose another woman over his family. Harper. But you want to make it right? Fine. Here's how: sign the divorce papers. Release the accounts. Walk away. And the baby? Will know they have a mother who loved them enough to demand better than a father who only showed up when he had nothing left to lose. His face crumpled. For a moment, I saw a glimpse of the man I'd fallen in love with, vulnerable, real. But then I remembered how easily he'd worn other masks before. I do love you, he whispered. No, you love the idea of me. The wife who made you look good, who supported your dreams while setting aside her own. But that woman's gone. The monitor's beeping increased. A nurse appeared, frowning at my vitals. I think it's time for you to leave, she told Ethan. He stood, straightening his shoulders. The accounts will be unfrozen by morning. I'll have my lawyer send over the signed papers. Goodbye, Ethan. He paused at the door. For what it's worth, I really am sorry. I know, I said quietly. But sorry doesn't fix what's broken. After he left, Chloe and Lucas came back in. Lucas handed me a chocolate bar, my favorite kind. You okay? He asked. I touched my stomach, feeling the smallest flutter of movement. No. But I will be. The board called, Chloe said. They want to talk to you about Ethan's replacement. Apparently, they're impressed with how you handled everything. I don't want anything to do with that company. Maybe not, she smiled. But they're offering a pretty generous settlement to keep it that way. I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted. The past weeks felt like a lifetime, each betrayal and confrontation leaving its mark. But for the first time, I could see beyond the pain, beyond the revenge. Sometimes winning isn't about destroying your opponent. Sometimes it's about finding the strength to walk away and build something new from the ashes of what was lost. 6 months later, I stood in my new apartment, watching the sunset through floor-to-ceiling windows. My baby girl kicked inside me, strong and steady, like she was reminding me we'd made it. The divorce papers had come through last week. Ethan signed everything without argument, including the generous settlement and support agreement. I heard through Jenna that he'd moved to Seattle for a fresh start. Vanessa had apparently moved to London. Good riddance to both of them. Earth to Harper, Chloe called from the kitchen. These boxes won't unpack themselves. I was sorting through the last box when I found it, my old wedding album. I'd forgotten I'd packed it. Want me to throw it out? Chloe asked, watching me carefully. No, I said, surprising myself. It's part of the story I'll tell her someday. About how her mom found her strength. The doorbell rang. Lucas stood there with takeout and paint samples. Thought you might want to start planning the nursery. He'd been doing that lately, showing up with just what I needed, exactly when I needed it. Not pushing, just being there. It scared me how much I'd started looking forward to his visits. Perfect timing, I said, letting him in. Though I should warn you, Chloe has strong opinions about color schemes. I heard that. Chloe called out. And I'm right about the yellow. As they playfully argued about paint colors, I opened my phone to a new email from Ethan. My heart didn't race anymore when I saw his name. I signed up for therapy, he'd written. Not to win you back, I know that's impossible. But because I need to understand why I destroyed the best thing in my life. I hope someday our daughter can know a better version of me than the man I was. I didn't respond, but I didn't delete it either. Some wounds need time to heal, and some stories don't have neat endings. Harper. Lucas was watching me, concern in his eyes. You okay? Yeah, I said, putting my phone away. Just thinking about endings and beginnings. Speaking of beginnings, Chloe interrupted. Lucas, tell Harper about that house for sale near the school. He shot her a look. I was going to bring that up naturally. What house? I asked. It's nothing, just. There's this craftsman with a great yard, perfect for kids. It's close to both our schools, and. He ran a hand through his hair. I know it's too soon, but maybe someday. The old me would have panicked at the hint of future possibilities. But I wasn't that person anymore. Tell me about the house, I said. Later that night, after they'd left, I sat in what would be the nursery, surrounded by paint samples and half-unpacked boxes. My daughter kicked again, and I placed my hand over the spot. You know what, little one? Sometimes the happy ending isn't the one you planned. Sometimes it's better. I picked up my phone and typed a final email to Ethan. I hope you find what you're looking for. She deserves to know both her parents found peace. Then I picked up my phone again and texted Lucas, about that house. When can we see it? The future stretched out before me, not perfect but full of possibility. I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, desperately trying to hold on to a life that was already gone. I wished I could tell her that losing everything would lead to finding herself. But maybe that's the thing about rock bottom, you can't see the way out until you start climbing. And sometimes, just sometimes, what you build from the ruins turns out to be stronger than what fell apart. I looked at the paint samples scattered across the floor, each color representing a different possible future. Tomorrow, I'd start painting. Tonight, I'd just breathe, grateful for endings that make way for new beginnings.
I wiped my floury hands on my apron and reached for the ringing phone. Laura's Bakery, how can I help you? Mom, it's me. Can you pick me up from soccer practice? Dad forgot again. I sighed, glancing at the clock. Sure, sweetie, I'll be there in 20 minutes. As I hung up, my assistant Megan poked her head around the kitchen door. Everything okay, Laura? Just Mark forgetting the kids again. Can you handle closing up? Megan nodded, and I grabbed my purse, heading out into the crisp autumn air. The drive to the soccer field was quick, and I spotted my daughter, Emma, sitting on the curb, her chin resting on her knees. Hey, kiddo, I called, rolling down the window. Hop in. Emma climbed into the car, her face a storm cloud. Dad never remembers anything anymore. I'm sure he's just busy with work, I said, not entirely believing it myself. How about we stop for ice cream on the way home? Emma's face brightened, and we chatted about her day as we drove to the local ice cream parlor. As we pulled into the driveway at home, I noticed Mark's car was already there. Why don't you go start your homework? I suggested to Emma. I'll bring your ice cream in. I found Mark in his home office, hunched over his drafting table. Hey, I said, leaning against the doorframe. You forgot Emma again. He looked up, genuine surprise on his face. Oh, God, I'm sorry, Laura. I got caught up in this new project and... It's fine, I interrupted, not wanting to hear another excuse. Just try to remember next time, okay? Mark nodded, and I turned to leave, but something caught my eye. A small, ornate box sat on the edge of his desk, one I'd never seen before. What's that? I asked, pointing. Mark's eyes widened slightly. Oh, just some old keepsakes. Found them when I was cleaning out the attic last weekend. I reached for the box, but Mark's hand shot out, stopping me. It's nothing interesting, really. Just some old photos and stuff. His reaction piqued my curiosity, but I let it go. Okay, I'm going to check on Emma. That night, after the kids were in bed, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling about that box. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Finally, I slipped out of bed and padded down to Mark's office. The box was still there, tempting me. I hesitated for a moment, then opened it. Inside were a few old photos, ticket stubs, and a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it, my heart racing. My dearest Mark, it began. I know we said goodbye, but I can't stop thinking about you. What we had was special, and I'm not ready to let it go. Please meet me at our spot. We need to talk. All my love, Scarlett. I stared at the letter, my hands shaking. Scarlett? Who was Scarlett? And why was Mark keeping a love letter from her? The sound of footsteps made me jump. I quickly folded the letter and put it back in the box. closing it just as Mark appeared in the doorway. "Laura, what are you doing up?" I forced a smile. "Just getting some water. Couldn't sleep." As I brushed past him, my mind was reeling. Who was this Scarlett, and what did she mean to Mark? And more importantly, why had he kept this letter hidden all these years? I climbed back into bed, my thoughts a whirlwind. One thing was certain, our peaceful life was about to change, and I had a feeling it wouldn't be for the better. I couldn't shake the image of that letter from my mind as I pulled into Henry and Karen's driveway. The familiar scent of Karen's roses wafted through the air as I stepped out of the car, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. Karen answered the door, her face lighting up. "Laura, what a lovely surprise. Come in, dear." I followed her into the living room, where Henry was reading the newspaper. He looked up, his bushy eyebrows raising. "Laura, is everything all right?" "I'm not sure," I admitted, sinking into an armchair. "I need to ask you both something, and I need you to be honest with me." Karen and Henry exchanged a glance. "Of course, dear," Karen said, sitting down next to her husband. "What is it?" I took a deep breath. "Who's Scarlett?" The silence that followed was deafening. Henry's face paled, and Karen's hand flew to her mouth. "Where did you hear that name?" Henry asked, his voice gruff. "I found a letter," I said, my heart pounding. "In Mark's things. From her." Karen reached out, patting my hand. "Oh, Laura, that was so long ago. We thought it was all in the past." "What was in the past?" I pressed. "Who is she?" Henry sighed, setting down his paper. "Scarlett was Mark's high school sweetheart. They were inseparable for years. We all thought they'd end up married." "What happened?" I asked, dreading the answer. "She disappeared," Karen said softly. "Right after graduation. No note, no explanation. Just gone." I felt a chill run down my spine. "And Mark?" "He was devastated," Henry said. "Spent months looking for her. It nearly broke him." Karen nodded. "We were so worried. But then he met you and, well, we thought he'd finally moved on." My mind was reeling. Why didn't anyone ever tell me about her? "Mark asked us not to," Henry said. "Said it was in the past and he wanted to focus on his future with you." I stood up abruptly, needing to move, but he kept her letter, all these years. Karen's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Laura, I'm sure it doesn't mean anything. Mark loves you." "Does he?" I asked, more to myself than to them. "If he loved me, why would he keep secrets?" Henry stood, placing a hand on my shoulder. "People are complicated, Laura. Sometimes we hold on to things we shouldn't, even when we've moved on." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As I turned to leave, Karen called out, "Laura, wait, there's something else you should know." I froze, my hand on the doorknob. "What is it?" Karen hesitated, looking at Henry. He nodded, and she continued. "About a year before you and Mark met, there were rumors that Scarlett had been seen back in town." My breath caught in my throat. "And?" "And nothing," Henry said. "If she was here, she didn't stay long. Mark never mentioned seeing her." I left their house with more questions than answers, my mind spinning. As I pulled into my own driveway, I saw Mark's car. He was home early. Taking a deep breath, I walked into the house. Mark was in the kitchen, making coffee. "Hey," he said, smiling. "You're home early. Everything okay?" I looked at him, really looked at him, searching for any sign of the man who had been so devastated by Scarlett's disappearance. All I saw was my husband, the father of my children. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "About Scarlett." The coffee mug slipped from Mark's grasp, shattering on the floor. In that moment, I knew. Whatever Mark's relationship with Scarlett had been, it was far from over. The shattered mug lay forgotten at our feet as Mark's face drained of color. "Laura, I can explain," he stammered. "Then explain," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "Explain why you've kept a love letter from your high school sweetheart hidden all these years." Mark ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit I'd always found endearing. Now it just made me angry. "It's not what you think, Scarlett. She's part of my past, that's all." "A past you never told me about," I countered. "A past your parents say nearly broke you." His eyes widened. "You talked to my parents?" "I had to," I snapped, "since my husband wasn't being honest with me." Mark sighed, sinking into a kitchen chair. "I'm sorry, Laura. I should have told you about Scarlett years ago, but it was painful, and I thought it was over." "Is it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "Of course it is. "You're my wife, Laura. I love you." I wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at me. Then why keep the letter? Mark hesitated, and in that moment, I knew there was more. "Mark," I said, my voice hardening, "what aren't you telling me?" He stood up abruptly, pacing the kitchen. "About a year before we met, Scarlett came back to town. My heart sank. Your mother mentioned rumors, but she said you never saw her." Mark's face contorted with guilt. "I lied to them. I did see her." The room seemed to spin. I gripped the counter for support. And nothing happened," he said quickly. "We talked. She apologized for leaving. But I was still angry, still hurt. I told her I never wanted to see her again." "But you kept her letter," I said, the pieces slowly falling into place. "You kept it all this time." Mark reached for me, but I stepped back. "Laura, please. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a reminder of a different time in my life." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "No, Mark, it's more than that. You've been holding on to her all these years, even if you didn't realize it." His face crumpled. "I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you." "But you did," I said, my voice breaking. "And now I don't know if I can trust you." I turned to leave, but Mark's next words stopped me cold. "There's something else." I slowly faced him, dread pooling in my stomach. "What?" Mark's eyes were filled with tears. "When Scarlett came back, she wasn't alone." My breath caught in my throat. "What do you mean?" "She had a baby with her," Mark said, his voice barely audible. "A little boy." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Are you saying?" Mark nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "I don't know for sure, but the timing fits, and he looked so much like me." I stumbled backwards, my mind reeling. "You have a son? With Scarlett?" "I don't know," Mark said, reaching for me again. "I swear, Laura, I never saw them again after that day. I didn't want to know." But I was beyond hearing his explanations. My entire world had just shattered, and I couldn't breathe. Without a word, I grabbed my keys and ran out of the house, ignoring Mark's calls behind me. As I drove aimlessly through town, tears blurring my vision, one thought kept repeating in my mind. My husband might have another family. A family he'd kept secret for over 20 years. I pulled over, my hands shaking as I reached for my phone. I needed answers, and I knew there was only one person who could give them to me. With trembling fingers, I searched online for Scarlett in our town. And there she was. Scarlett Anderson, owner of a local art gallery. Before I could talk myself out of it, I typed in the address and started the car. It was time to meet the woman who had haunted my marriage for far too long. My heart pounded as I stood outside Scarlett's art gallery. The closed sign hung in the window, but I could see movement inside. Taking a deep breath, I knocked. A woman with long auburn hair opened the door, her green eyes widening in surprise. "I'm sorry, we're closed." "Are you Scarlett?" I interrupted, my voice shaking. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I am. And you are?" "Laura," I said, watching her face carefully. "Mark's wife." The color drained from Scarlett's face. She stepped back, allowing me inside. "I think we need to talk." The gallery was filled with vibrant paintings, but I barely noticed them as I followed Scarlett to a small office in the back. She gestured for me to sit, but I remained standing, too agitated to be still. "I assume Mark told you about me," Scarlett said softly. I laughed bitterly. "No, actually. I found your letter, the one you wrote him years ago." Scarlett's eyes widened. "He kept that, after all this time?" "Apparently," I said, my anger rising. "What I want to know is why you came back. Why you showed up with a baby and turned Mark's life upside down." Scarlett flinched. "I never meant to hurt anyone. I was young and scared when I left. When I came back, I thought Mark deserved to know the truth." "And what truth is that?" I demanded, though I already knew the answer. Before Scarlett could respond, the office door opened. A young man walked in, his features so familiar it took my breath away. He was the spitting image of Mark at that age. "Mom?" he said, looking between us with confusion. "Is everything okay?" Scarlett's face paled further. "Ashton, honey, could you give us a minute?" But I couldn't take my eyes off him. "You're Mark's son," I whispered. Ashton's eyes widened. "What? Mom, what's she talking about?" Scarlett stood, placing a hand on Ashton's arm. "Ash, this is Laura. She's Mark's wife." The room spun as I watched understanding dawn on Ashton's face. He looked at me, then back at his mother. "Mark, the man you told me about? He's my father?" Scarlett nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Ash. I never meant for you to find out like this." I stumbled backwards, gripping the edge of a desk for support. This was real. Mark had a son, a grown son he'd never known. How could you keep this from him? I asked Scarlett, my voice breaking. From both of them. Scarlett's face crumpled. I tried to tell Mark when I came back, but he was so angry, so hurt. He said he never wanted to see me again. I couldn't force him to be a father if he didn't want to be. Ashton's face hardened. So you lied to me my whole life instead? I thought I was protecting you, Scarlett said, reaching for him, but Ashton stepped back. I need some air, he muttered, brushing past me and out of the office. I watched him go, my heart aching for this young man whose world had just been shattered. Then I turned back to Scarlett. Does Mark know? I asked. Does he know for certain that Ashton is his son? Scarlett shook her head. I never told him explicitly, but I think he must have suspected. The weight of everything crashed down on me, my marriage, my life, everything I thought I knew had been built on lies and secrets. I can't do this, I said, more to myself than to Scarlett. I can't pretend this isn't happening. Scarlett stepped towards me, her face etched with guilt. Laura, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt anyone, especially not you or Ashton. But her words barely registered, piecing together a plan. I knew what I had to do. Mark's birthday is next week, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. There's going to be a party. I think you and Ashton should come. Scarlett's eyes widened in shock. What, Laura? I don't think that's a good idea. No, I cut her off. It's time for the truth to come out. All of it. No more secrets, no more lies. As I walked out of the gallery, leaving a stunned Scarlett behind, I felt a strange sense of calm. The worst had happened, and I had survived. Now it was time to take control of my life again. And it would start with Mark's birthday party. I sat across from Hazel in her law office, my hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee. The events of the past few days tumbled out of me in a rush, leaving me breathless and on the verge of tears. Hazel leaned back in her chair, her brow furrowed. Laura, I'm so sorry you're going through this. It's a lot to process. I laughed bitterly. That's an understatement. My whole life feels like a lie. Have you talked to Mark since you found out about Ashton? Hazel asked gently. I shook my head. I've been staying at my sister's. I can't face him right now. Hazel nodded, her eyes full of sympathy. And what about the birthday party? Are you still planning to go through with it? I have to, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. I can't keep living like this, pretending everything's fine when it's not. I need the truth to come out. Are you sure that's wise? Hazel cautioned. Exposing everything at a public event could have serious consequences. I met her gaze, my resolve hardening. What about the consequences I'm already facing? The lies, the betrayal? I can't just sweep it under the rug. Hazel sighed, leaning forward. Laura, as your friend, I understand your pain. But as a lawyer, I have to advise you to think carefully about your next steps. If you're considering divorce. Divorce. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't even allowed myself to think that far ahead. It's a possibility you need to consider, Hazel said gently, and if that's the case, exposing Mark publicly could complicate legal proceedings. I stood up, pacing the office. So what am I supposed to do? Just pretend I don't know about his secret son? Act like my marriage isn't falling apart? Hazel stood, placing a comforting hand on my arm. No, of course not. But there might be a better way to handle this, one that protects you and your children. I froze. Oh God, the kids. How am I going to tell them about all this? One step at a time, Hazel soothed. First, I think you need to have an honest conversation with Mark, away from the party, away from Scarlett and Ashton. Just the two of you. I shook my head, tears spilling over. I don't know if I can face him alone. I'm so angry, Hazel, and hurt. What if I say something I can't take back? That's why I'm here, Hazel said, squeezing my arm. If you want, I can be present as a mediator, to keep things civil and protect your interests. I considered her words, my mind racing. The thought of confronting Mark was terrifying, but the alternative, continuing to live in this limbo of secrets and lies, was unbearable. Okay, I said finally. I'll talk to him, but I'm not backing down on the party. Scarlett and Ashton deserve to know the truth, too. Hazel nodded, a hint of worry in her eyes. Just promise me you'll be careful. Don't do anything rash. As I left Hazel's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Please come home. We need to talk. My heart raced as I typed out a reply. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Bring the truth this time. I drove home in a daze, my mind whirling with possibilities. What would happen tomorrow? Could my marriage survive this? And what about Ashton, the son Mark never knew he had? As I pulled into my driveway, I saw a figure sitting on the front steps. It was Ashton. He stood as I approached, his face a mirror of Mark's at that age. Mrs. Walker, I'm sorry to show up like this, but I need to know the truth about everything. I looked into his eyes, Mark's eyes, and made a decision. The time for secrets was over. Come inside, Ashton, I said, unlocking the door. I think we both deserve some answers. The day of Mark's birthday party arrived, and my stomach churned with a mix of dread and determination. I'd spent the past week in a haze of anger and confusion, avoiding Mark's calls and throwing myself into party preparations. Now, as I arranged the last of the decorations, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The doorbell rang, and I froze. It was too early for guests. My heart pounding, I opened the door to find Scarlett standing there, looking as nervous as I felt. "Laura," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wasn't sure if I should come, but I think we need to talk before everyone else arrives." I nodded, stepping aside to let her in. As she passed, I caught a whiff of her perfume, the same scent that had lingered on that old love letter. My fists clenched involuntarily. "Where's Ashton?" I asked, leading her to the kitchen. Scarlett's eyes widened. He's coming later. I wanted to speak with you alone first." I turned to face her, crossing my arms. "What could you possibly have to say to me?" She took a deep breath. "I want you to know that I never meant for any of this to happen. When I came back all those years ago, I truly believed Mark deserved to know about Ashton, but when he reacted so angrily, I thought it was best to keep my distance. And now," I challenged, "why come back into our lives now?" Scarlett's eyes filled with tears. Ashton started asking questions, about his father, about his past. I couldn't keep lying to him, and then when you showed up at the gallery, I realized it was time for the truth to come out. Before I could respond, the front door opened. Mark's voice called out, "Laura, are you here?" Scarlett and I froze, staring at each other in panic. Footsteps approached the kitchen, and then Mark appeared in the doorway. His eyes widened as he took in the scene before him. "Scarlett?" he gasped. "What are you doing here?" I watched as a myriad of emotions flashed across Mark's face, shock, confusion, and something else, something that looked dangerously like longing. "I invited her," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And Ashton, too. I thought it was time we all had an honest conversation." Mark's face paled. "Ashton? He's coming here?" Scarlett nodded, her eyes never leaving Mark's face. "He wants to meet you, Mark. He deserves to know his father." The word father hung in the air between us, heavy with 2 decades of secrets and lies. I watched as Mark stumbled backwards, gripping the doorframe for support. "Laura," he said, his voice breaking. "I can explain. I never meant to." "Save it," I cut him off. "I don't want to hear any more lies. Tonight we're going to tell everyone the truth. All of it." Mark's eyes darted between Scarlett and me, panic evident on his face. "You can't be serious. What about the kids? What about our family?" "Our family?" I laughed bitterly. "Our family has been built on lies, Mark. It's time for that to end." Just then the doorbell rang again. The first guests were arriving. Mark looked at me pleadingly, but I turned away, heading for the door. "Laura, wait," Scarlett called out. I paused, looking back at her. "Are you sure about this? Once we do this, there's no going back." I met her gaze, then Mark's. In that moment, I saw the full weight of their shared history, the secrets they'd kept, and the lives they'd changed. And I knew, with absolute certainty, what I had to do. "I'm sure," I said, my voice firm. "It's time for the truth, no matter the cost." As I opened the door to greet our guests, I could feel the tension radiating from the kitchen. The stage was set, the players were in place, and in just a few short hours everything would change. Let the party begin. The party was in full swing, but I felt like I was moving through a fog. Laughter and chatter filled the air, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. Mark stood across the room, his eyes darting nervously between me, Scarlett, and the door. I watched as Ashton arrived, his resemblance to Mark even more striking in the warm light of our living room. Gasps and whispers rippled through the crowd as people noticed the uncanny similarity. "Laura?" Hazel appeared at my elbow, her voice low and urgent. "Are you sure about this? It's not too late to handle this privately. I shook my head, my resolve hardening. No, Hazel. No more secrets. No more lies. Taking a deep breath, I clinked my glass with a spoon, calling for everyone's attention. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me. Thank you all for coming to celebrate Mark's birthday, I began, my voice surprisingly steady. But before we continue, there's something you all need to know. Mark stepped forward, panic etched on his face. Laura, please. No, Mark, I cut him off. It's time for the truth. I turned back to the crowd, my gaze finding Scarlett and Ashton. Many of you may have noticed a new face here tonight. This is Ashton, and he has a very special connection to our family. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the room. I saw Henry and Karen exchange worried glances. Ashton, I continued, is Mark's son. A son he never knew he had, because his mother, Scarlett, left town before telling Mark she was pregnant. The room erupted in gasps and exclamations. I watched as shock, disbelief, and dawning understanding played across the faces of our friends and family. Mark stepped forward, his face ashen. Laura, I can explain. Can you? I challenged, my voice rising. Can you explain why you kept Scarlett's letter all these years? Why you never told me about her, or about the possibility that you had a child out there? Scarlett moved to stand beside Ashton, who looked shell-shocked. I never meant for this to happen, she said, her voice trembling. I thought I was protecting everyone by staying away. Protecting us? I laughed bitterly. You've torn our lives apart. The room fell silent, the tension palpable. I could feel the weight of everyone's stares, the judgment, the pity, but I wasn't done. For years, I continued, my voice breaking, I thought I knew who my husband was. I thought we had built a life together based on trust and honesty, but it was all a lie. Mark reached for me, his eyes pleading. Laura, please, I love you. I never meant to hurt you. I stepped back out of his reach. If you loved me, you would have told me the truth. You would have given me the chance to understand, to forgive. Ashton spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted to know where I came from. My heart broke for him, for the innocent victim in all of this. I know, Ashton, and you deserve the truth, just like the rest of us. I turned back to the stunned crowd. I'm sorry to ruin the party, but I couldn't keep living this lie. Mark and Scarlett may have started this, but I'm ending it, here and now. With shaking hands, I removed my wedding ring and placed it on the table. The soft clink seemed to echo in the silent room. Happy birthday, Mark, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I hope the truth was worth it. As I turned to leave, the room erupted into chaos. I could hear Mark calling my name, Scarlett's sobs, and the shocked exclamations of our guests. But I didn't look back. I stepped out into the cool night air, feeling both utterly broken and strangely free. The truth was out, the secrets exposed. Now I had to figure out how to rebuild my life from the ashes of the lies that had consumed it. The weeks following Mark's birthday party were a blur of tears, sleepless nights, and endless conversations with Hazel about divorce proceedings. I threw myself into my work at the bakery, finding solace in the familiar rhythms of kneading dough and decorating cakes. One quiet afternoon, as I was closing up shop, the bell above the door chimed. I looked up to see Ashton standing there, looking uncertain. Mrs. Walker. Laura, he began. I hope it's okay that I'm here. I wanted to talk to you. I nodded, gesturing for him to sit at one of the small tables. Of course, Ashton. What's on your mind? He fidgeted with a napkin, his eyes, so like Mark's, filled with a mix of emotions. I wanted to apologize for everything that's happened. I never meant to cause so much pain. My heart ached for this young man, caught in the middle of a mess he didn't create. Ashton, none of this is your fault. You have nothing to apologize for. He looked up, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I always wondered about my father, but I never imagined finding him would destroy a family. I reached out, covering his hand with mine. You didn't destroy anything, Ashton. The lies and secrets did that long before you came into the picture. We talked for hours about his life growing up, about Scarlett, about Mark. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the bakery floor, I felt something shift inside me. A weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying began to lift. The next day, I met with Mark at Hazel's office to finalize our separation agreement. As we sat across from each other, The man I'd loved for so many years looked older, worn down by the weight of his secrets. "Laura," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I know I've hurt you beyond forgiveness, but I want you to know that I truly do love you." I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt a wave of emotions wash over me: anger, sadness, and surprisingly, a glimmer of understanding. "I believe you, Mark," I said softly, "but love isn't enough when there's no trust. We can't go back to what we were." He nodded, a single tear rolling down his cheek. "I know, I just hope, someday, you can forgive me." As I signed the papers, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. This wasn't the ending I'd imagined for our story, but perhaps it was the beginning of a new chapter. Weeks turned into months, and slowly I began to rebuild my life. The bakery thrived, and I found joy in simple pleasures: morning walks, coffee with Hazel, quiet evenings with a good book. And to my surprise, I found myself forming a tentative friendship with Ashton, who had become a regular at the bakery. One sunny afternoon, as I was experimenting with a new recipe, Ashton appeared at the counter, a shy smile on his face. "I was wondering," he said, "if you might need an extra pair of hands around here. I've always loved baking, and, well, I thought it might be nice to get to know you better." I felt a warmth spread through my chest, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. "I'd like that, Ashton. I'd like that very much." As we worked side by side, rolling out dough and sharing stories, I realized that life had a funny way of giving you exactly what you needed, even if it wasn't what you'd expected. The betrayal that had shattered my world had also opened doors I never knew existed. It had shown me my own strength, the depth of my friendships, and the capacity for forgiveness I didn't know I possessed. As I looked at Ashton, laughing as he dusted flour off his nose, I knew that while my marriage to Mark was over, my story was far from finished. There would be more chapters, more twists and turns, more joy and pain. But this time, I would write my own narrative on my own terms. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see where the story would lead.
My name is Clara Sinclair, and I never expected to hear my husband's name whispered with such venom at a party I was attending. But there I was, standing on the patio of Gregory's lavish mansion, when Vivian's voice sliced through the evening air like a poison blade. "Elliot will always come back to me. Clara's just a placeholder." I froze, my champagne flute halfway to my lips. The cool night breeze suddenly felt icy against my skin as I strained to hear more. "Oh, come on, Vivian," a man's voice replied, thick with skepticism. "They've been married for 3 years now. I think it's time to let it go." Vivian's laugh was sharp and brittle. "You clearly don't know Elliot like I do. He's just playing house with Little Miss Accountant. When he's ready for the real thing, he'll be back." I'd had enough. Squaring my shoulders, I stepped around the corner, coming face to face with Vivian and her companion. "Is that so?" I said, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling in my chest. Vivian's perfect features arranged themselves into a mask of surprise. "Clara, I didn't see you there. We were just catching up on old times." "I'm sure you were," I replied coolly. "Tell me, Vivian, do you often discuss your ex-boyfriend's marriages at parties? Or am I just special?" The man beside her, I recognized him as one of Gregory's business associates, looked uncomfortable. "I think I hear someone calling me," he muttered, beating a hasty retreat. Vivian's smile never wavered, but her eyes hardened. "Oh, Clara, you're so sensitive. I was just reminiscing about the good old days. Surely you're not threatened by a few harmless memories." Before I could respond, I felt a warm hand on my lower back. "There you are, sweetheart," Elliot said, pressing a kiss to my cheek. "I've been looking everywhere for you." His eyes flickered to Vivian, and I saw a flash of something: surprise? Discomfort? Cross his face. "Vivian," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "I didn't know you'd be here tonight." "Elliot." Vivian's voice dripped with honey. "What a lovely surprise. I was just telling Clara here about some of our adventures back in college. Remember that weekend in Cabo?" I felt Elliot stiffen beside me. "That was a long time ago, Viv," he said firmly. "Ancient history." "Of course," Vivian purred. "But you know what they say, history has a way of repeating itself." I'd had enough. "Well, it's been delightful catching up. I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. But I'm afraid we have other guests to greet. Enjoy the party, Vivian. As we walked away, I could feel Vivian's eyes boring into my back. Elliot squeezed my hand. You okay? He murmured. I nodded, forcing a smile. Of course. Why wouldn't I be? But as we made our way through the crowded party, exchanging pleasantries with acquaintances and business associates, I couldn't shake the unease that had settled in my stomach. Vivian's words echoed in my mind, along with the memory of Elliot's reaction. It was subtle, but I knew my husband. There had been a moment, just a flicker, of something more than simple discomfort at seeing an ex. As the night wore on, I found myself watching Elliot more closely. The way he laughed a little too loudly at Gregory's jokes. The extra glass of scotch he knocked back when he thought I wasn't looking. And then, just as we were preparing to leave, I saw it, a quick, furtive glance across the room to where Vivian stood, holding court with a group of admirers. It was nothing, I told myself. A coincidence. Paranoia brought on by too much champagne and Vivian's poisonous words. But as we drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past the window, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. That this party, this chance encounter, was the beginning of something I wasn't prepared for. Little did I know just how right I was. The weeks following Gregory's party were a blur of social engagements and business dinners. Everywhere we turned, Vivian seemed to materialize, her presence a constant reminder of that night on the patio. I tried to shake off my unease, but it clung to me like a second skin. Clara, darling. Vivian's voice rang out across the crowded restaurant. Elliot and I were having dinner with some of his business associates when she sauntered over, all smiles and sparkling eyes. What a delightful coincidence. I doubted it was a coincidence at all. Vivian, I replied, forcing a smile. How unexpected. Elliot shifted uncomfortably beside me. Viv, we're in the middle of a business dinner. Oh, don't let me interrupt, she purred, laying a hand on Elliot's shoulder. I just wanted to say hello to my favorite power couple. As she chatted with the group, I watched Elliot's face. He was smiling, but there was tension around his eyes. When Vivian finally sashayed away, I couldn't help but notice how his gaze lingered on her retreating form. She certainly knows how to make an entrance. One of Elliot's associates chuckled. That's our Vivian, Elliot replied, his tone light, but his eyes avoiding mine. The next day, I met Margot for coffee, desperate for a sympathetic ear. I don't know, Margot. I sighed, stirring my latte absently. Am I overreacting? Elliot says I'm being paranoid, but... Margot's eyes narrowed. But what? Has something else happened? I hesitated, then plunged ahead. Vivian's everywhere lately. At parties, restaurants, even the gym. And Elliot. He's different when she's around. Distracted. Tense. Have you talked to him about it? I've tried, I admitted. But he just brushes it off, says it's all in my head. Margot reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Trust your instincts, Clara. You're too smart to ignore them. Her words echoed in my mind that evening as I sorted through the laundry. As I shook out Elliot's suit jacket, a small piece of paper fluttered to the floor. Curious, I picked it up. My heart stopped as I read the hastily scrawled words. Meet me at the usual place. 8 p.m.
V.
The room spun. I sank onto the bed, the note clutched in my trembling hand. This couldn't be happening. There had to be an explanation. I heard the front door open. Elliot's familiar footsteps in the hallway. Clara, he called out. You home? I quickly stuffed the note in my pocket, my mind racing. In here, I managed to reply, my voice surprisingly steady. Elliot appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie. Everything okay? You look pale. I stood up, forcing a smile. Just tired. Long day at work. He nodded, seemingly satisfied with my explanation. As he moved to hang up his jacket, I watched him closely, searching for any sign of guilt or deception. But his face was an unreadable mask. I have to work late tomorrow, he said casually, not meeting my eyes. Big project due. My stomach clenched. Tomorrow was Thursday. The note had said 8 p.m. Oh. I kept my voice light. Anything I can help with? He shook his head quickly.
No.
Just boring paperwork. You'd hate it. I nodded, my mind whirling. What was I going to do? Confront him? Follow him? The thought of my husband sneaking around with Vivian made me feel physically ill. As we got ready for bed that night, the silence between us felt oppressive. Elliot kissed me goodnight, but it felt perfunctory, distant. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, the note burning a hole in my pocket and my heart. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow, I would find out the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Because one thing was certain, this unseen rivalry with Vivian was no longer just in my head. It was very, very real. The next evening, I paced our living room, my nerves frayed to breaking point. Elliot had left for his late night at the office an hour ago, his kiss on my cheek feeling like a brand of betrayal. The note burned in my pocket, a constant reminder of the confrontation to come. At 7:45, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys and drove to the address I'd found in Elliot's contact list for Vivian's new gallery. My hands shook as I parked across the street, watching the entrance intently. At 7:58, a familiar car pulled up. My heart sank as I watched Elliot step out, straightening his tie before entering the building. I waited 5 excruciating minutes before following. The gallery was dimly lit, soft music playing in the background. I heard voices coming from a back room and crept closer, my heart pounding. Elliot, darling, I'm so glad you could make it. Vivian's sultry voice drifted out. Vivian, we need to talk about this. It can't go on, Elliot replied, his tone strained. I couldn't take it anymore. I burst into the room, my voice trembling with anger and hurt. What exactly can't go on, Elliot? They both whirled to face me, shock evident on their faces. Elliot paled. Clara, what are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing, I spat. Funny place for a business meeting, don't you think? Vivian recovered first, a smirk playing on her lips. Oh, Clara, how embarrassing for you. Did you really follow your husband here like some jealous schoolgirl? I ignored her, focusing on Elliot. I found your note. Meet me at the usual place. How long has this been going on? Elliot's face crumpled. Clara, it's not what you think. I can explain dash. Then explain, I shouted, tears threatening to spill. Explain why you've been lying to me, sneaking around with her. It's business, Clara, he pleaded. Vivian's father is a major investor in my company. I had to dash. Had to what? I interrupted. Meet his daughter in secret? Lie to your wife. Vivian laughed, the sound grating on my nerves. Oh, honey, you really don't understand how the business world works, do you? Sometimes, to seal a deal, you need a personal touch. I saw red. Before I knew what I was doing, my hand connected with Vivian's cheek, the slap echoing in the quiet gallery. Clara. Elliot grabbed my arm, pulling me back. Stop it. I wrenched away from him, my voice ice cold. Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me. Elliot's face was a mask of anguish. Please let me explain. Henry's investment is crucial for the company. I had to keep Vivian happy, but I swear, nothing happened between us. Nothing happened? I laughed bitterly. You've been lying to me for weeks, Elliot. Meeting her in secret. That's not nothing. Vivian rubbed her cheek, her eyes glittering with malice. Face it, Clara. You're out of your depth here. Elliot needs someone who understands his world, not some number-crunching nobody. I turned to leave, unable to bear another moment in that room. Elliot caught my arm again. Clara, wait. Please. I love you. This was all just business, I swear. I looked into his eyes, searching for the man I'd fallen in love with. But all I saw was a stranger. If this is your idea of business, Elliot, then I want no part of it. Or you. As I stormed out of the gallery, I heard Vivian's mocking laughter behind me. I told you she couldn't handle it, Elliot. Now, where were we? I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling. When I arrived, I noticed a sleek black car parked outside our house. A distinguished-looking older man stepped out as I approached. Mrs. Sinclair, he asked, his voice grave. I'm Henry Blackwood, Vivian's father. I think we need to talk. I stared at him, suddenly realizing that this night was far from over. The family divide had only just begun. The days following my confrontation with Elliot and Vivian were a blur of sleepless nights and tense silences. Elliot had come home that night, full of apologies and explanations, but I couldn't bring myself to listen. The conversation with Henry Blackwood still echoed in my mind, his warnings about his daughter's manipulative nature only adding to my confusion and hurt. I threw myself into work, desperate for a distraction. It was during a lunch break, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, that I first noticed something was off. A photo of Elliot at a charity gala popped up on my feed, but it wasn't the image that caught my attention. It was the caption. Elliot Sinclair looking dashing as always. Some men just can't be tied down, can they? Hashtag single and ready to mingle. My stomach churned as I realized the post was from Vivian's account. I scrolled further, finding more photos, more suggestive captions. Elliot at business dinners, Elliot at the gym, Elliot leaving his office late at night. Each image carefully curated to paint a picture of a man living a separate life from his wife. My phone buzzed with a text from Margot. Have you seen this? Call me ASAP. I met Margot at our favorite cafe an hour later, my hands shaking as I clutched my coffee. I don't understand, I said, fighting back tears. Why is she doing this? Margot's eyes flashed with anger. Because she's a manipulative bitch who can't stand to see you happy. She's trying to isolate you, Clara. Make you doubt everything. It's working, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Have you talked to Elliot about this? I shook my head. We've barely spoken since that night at the gallery. He keeps trying to explain, but I can't bear to hear it. Margot reached across the table, squeezing my hand. You need to confront this head-on, Clara. Both Vivian and Elliot. You can't let her win. As if on cue, my phone lit up with a notification. Another post from Vivian, this time a photo of her and Elliot at what looked like a business lunch. The caption made my blood run cold. Some partnerships are just meant to be. In business and in life. Hashtag soulmates. That's it, Margot said, her voice steely. We're putting an end to this right now. Before I could protest, she had grabbed my phone, furiously typing. I watched in a mix of horror and admiration as she commented on the post. Funny, I don't see Elliot's wedding ring in this photo. Must be an old picture, right? Because surely you wouldn't be stupid enough to post current photos implying a married man is single. That could be considered slander, couldn't it? Hashtag check your facts, hashtag lawyer up. Margot. I gasped. What are you doing? She handed my phone back, a satisfied smirk on her face, giving that snake a taste of her own medicine. Now it's your turn. What do you mean? I mean it's time to fight fire with fire. If Vivian wants to play dirty on social media, let's show her how it's done. For the next hour, Margot and I crafted a series of posts, photos of Elliot and me from happier times, our wedding day, romantic vacations. Each one tagged with pointed hashtags like hashtag happily married and hashtag true love. It felt petty, but also strangely empowering. As we were about to post the last photo, my phone rang. Elliot's name flashed on the screen. You need to answer it, Margot urged. I took a deep breath and swiped to accept the call. Hello. Clara. Elliot's voice was urgent. We need to talk.
Now.
Things are spiraling out of control. I could hear the panic in his voice, and despite everything, my heart ached for him. Okay, I said softly. I'm listening. As Elliot began to speak, I realized that this social media war was just the beginning. The real battle for my marriage and my dignity was about to begin. And I was finally ready to fight. The annual charity gala for the city's children's hospital loomed on my calendar, a glittering event I'd once looked forward to. Now, it felt like a minefield. Elliot had been called away on an urgent business trip, leaving me to face the wolves alone. As I stepped into the grand ballroom, a sea of familiar faces turned to me, their expressions a mix of curiosity and poorly concealed pity. I plastered on my best smile, determined not to let them see me falter. Champagne flute in hand, I navigated the crowd, exchanging pleasantries and deflecting not-so-subtle inquiries about Elliot's absence. Clara, darling, A booming voice cut through the chatter. I turned to see Henry Blackwood approaching, his silver hair gleaming under the chandeliers. "You look absolutely radiant tonight, Mr. Blackwood." I greeted him, surprised by the warmth in his voice. "It's good to see you." He waved a hand dismissively. "Please call me Henry. I was hoping we might have a chat. There are some business matters I'd like to discuss." Intrigued and slightly wary, I followed him to a quieter corner of the room. As we talked, I found myself unexpectedly charmed by Henry's wit and intelligence. He spoke passionately about his latest business ventures, asking for my opinion on financial matters with genuine interest. "You know, Clara," he said, his eyes twinkling, "I've always said Elliot was a lucky man. But I'm beginning to think I underestimated just how lucky." I felt a blush creep up my cheeks. "That's very kind of you to say, Henry. It's the truth. In fact, I have a proposition for you." He leaned in conspiratorially. "I'm looking for a sharp mind to help oversee a new project. Someone with financial acumen and a fresh perspective. I think you might be just the person I'm looking for." My heart raced at the opportunity. "I'm flattered, but wouldn't that be a conflict of interest? With your investment in Elliot's company?" Henry's expression darkened slightly. "To be frank, Clara, I'm beginning to have some concerns about that investment. But that's a conversation for another time. This project would be entirely separate, under my personal oversight." As we continued to discuss the details, I couldn't shake the feeling that this could be a turning point. A chance to prove myself beyond the shadow of my marriage and the drama with Vivian. Speak of the devil, I spotted Vivian across the room, her eyes narrowing as she took in the animated conversation between her father and me. She began to make her way towards us, but Henry noticed her approach and quickly steered me away. "Let's continue this discussion somewhere more private," he suggested, guiding me towards the terrace. The cool night air was a relief after the stuffy ballroom. Henry produced a business card, pressing it into my hand. "Think about my offer, Clara. I believe we could do great things together." As he turned to leave, he paused, his expression softening. "And Clara? Don't let the whispers and stares get to you. You're made of stronger stuff than that." I watched him disappear back into the crowd, my mind whirling with possibilities. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope, of purpose beyond the drama that had consumed my life. Returning to the ballroom, I found myself face to face with Vivian. Her smile was sharp as a knife's edge. Well, she purred. "Cozying up to Daddy Dearest now, are we?"
How?
"Enterprising of you." I met her gaze steadily. "You know, Vivian, I used to wonder what Elliot ever saw in you. Now I realize absolutely nothing of substance." Her eyes flashed with anger, but before she could retort, I continued, "Enjoy your games while you can, because I'm done playing." As I walked away, head held high, I could feel the weight of eyes on me. But this time, instead of shrinking under their scrutiny, I felt empowered. Henry's offer was more than just a business opportunity. It was a chance to reclaim my narrative, to show the world and myself what I was truly capable of. The game was changing, and for once, I felt like I might just have the winning hand. The weeks following Henry's job offer flew by in a whirlwind of activity. I threw myself into my new role, relishing the challenge and the distraction it provided from my crumbling personal life. Elliot and I were barely speaking, our conversations reduced to terse exchanges about household logistics. As I delved deeper into Henry's business dealings, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Contracts that should have been slam dunks for Elliot's company were mysteriously falling through. Deals were being sabotaged at the 11th hour, always with a competing bid swooping in to save the day. It wasn't until I stumbled across an email chain buried deep in the company archives that the pieces finally clicked into place. My hands shook as I read the damning evidence. Vivian had been using her father's connections to undermine Elliot's business, all while playing the devoted friend and confidant. I printed out the emails, my mind racing. Should I confront Vivian? Go straight to Henry? As I debated my next move, my phone buzzed with a text from Elliot. "We need to talk. Dinner tonight." My heart clenched. Despite everything, I still loved him. "Okay," I replied. 8 p.m. at home. The hours crawled by. When Elliot finally walked through the door, the tension between us was palpable. He looked haggard, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something more vulnerable. "Clara," he began, his voice hoarse. "I owe you an explanation. About Vivian, about everything." I held up a hand, silencing him. "Before you say anything, there's something you need to see." I handed him the stack of emails, watching his face as he read. His expression morphed from confusion to shock to anger. "This can't be real," he muttered. "Vivian wouldn't." "She couldn't." "She did," I said softly. "And she's been playing us both for fools." Elliot sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. "I've been such an idiot. Clara, I swear, nothing happened between Vivian and me. She kept insisting on these meetings, saying they were crucial for maintaining her father's investment. I thought I was protecting our future, but I was just playing right into her hands." I sat beside him, close but not touching. "Why didn't you tell me?" He looked up, his eyes filled with remorse. "I thought I could handle it. I didn't want to worry you. God, Clara, I've made such a mess of things." For the first time in months, I felt the wall between us start to crumble. "We both have," I admitted. "But this changes everything." Elliot nodded, a spark of his old determination returning. "We need to confront her. Show Henry what his daughter's been up to." "It's not that simple," I cautioned. "Henry's offered me a position in his company. If we're not careful, this could blow up in our faces." Elliot's eyes widened. "You've been working for Henry?" "Clara, that's brilliant. We can use this to our advantage." As we talked late into the night, formulating a plan, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in months, Elliot and I were on the same side. The next morning, I called Henry's office. "I need to schedule an urgent meeting," I told his secretary. "It's about Vivian." An hour later, I sat across from Henry in his opulent office, the incriminating emails spread out between us. His face grew increasingly grim as I laid out the evidence of his daughter's betrayal. "I had no idea," he said finally, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Clara, I can't thank you enough for bringing this to my attention. But I have to ask, what do you want in return for this information?" I met his gaze steadily. "Justice, Henry. For Elliot, for your company, and for myself. Vivian needs to be held accountable." Henry nodded slowly. "You're right, of course. But tread carefully, Clara. Vivian won't go down without a fight." As I left his office, my phone buzzed with a text from Elliot. "Vivian just called. She wants to meet tonight to discuss the future of our partnership." What should I do? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. "Tell her yes," I replied. "It's time to end this once and for all." The annual Blackwood Industries Gala was in full swing, the ballroom a glittering sea of designer gowns and tailored suits. I stood at the edge of the crowd, my heart pounding beneath my sleek black dress. Elliot was by my side, his hand resting protectively on the small of my back. "Are you sure about this?" he murmured, his eyes scanning the room for Vivian. I nodded, steeling myself. "It's now or never." As if on cue, Vivian appeared, resplendent in a crimson gown that clung to her curves. Her eyes narrowed as she spotted us, but her lips curved into a practiced smile as she sauntered over. "Elliot, darling," she purred, pointedly ignoring me. "I was beginning to think you'd stood me up." Elliot's grip on my waist tightened. "Vivian, we need to talk. Privately." She arched an eyebrow, her gaze flicking dismissively to me. "Of course. Shall we use Daddy's office?" As we followed her through the crowd, I caught Henry's eye across the room. He gave me a subtle nod, and I felt a surge of resolve. "This ends tonight." Vivian closed the office door behind us, her facade dropping as soon as we were alone. "All right, what's this about? I hope you're not here to bore me with more excuses about why our deal fell through." Elliot's jaw clenched. "No excuses, Vivian. We know what you've been doing." Her laugh was sharp and brittle. "And what exactly is it you think I've been doing?" I stepped forward, pulling out the folder of evidence I'd been carrying. "Sabotaging Elliot's business deals. Using your father's connections to undermine contracts. Manipulating both of us for your own gain." Vivian's eyes widened for a fraction of a second before her mask of cool indifference slipped back into place. That's quite an accusation, Clara. I hope you have proof to back it up. Oh, we do, Elliot said, his voice hard. Every email, every doctor contract, every backroom deal. It's all here. For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine fear in Vivian's eyes. But it was quickly replaced by a look of cold calculation. So what? You think you can just waltz in here and threaten me? In my father's company. Your father already knows, I said quietly. The color drained from Vivian's face. You're bluffing. As if on cue, the office door opened, and Henry stepped in. The look on his face was one of profound disappointment. I'm afraid they're not, Vivian. Vivian's composure cracked. Daddy, I can explain. Henry held up a hand, silencing her. I've seen the evidence, Vivian. There's nothing to explain. You don't understand, Vivian pleaded, her voice rising. I did it for us, for the company. Elliot's business was a threat. A threat. Henry's voice was sharp. The only threat here is you, Vivian. To this family's reputation, to the integrity of our business. Vivian's eyes darted wildly between us, like a cornered animal. You can't do this to me. I'm your daughter. And that makes this betrayal all the more painful, Henry said, his voice heavy with regret. As of this moment, you are no longer a part of Blackwood Industries. Your trust fund will be frozen, your position terminated. Vivian's face contorted with rage. You can't do this. I'll fight you. All of you. I'm afraid you'll find that quite difficult, I interjected, my voice steady. Given that all of your recent activities are now a matter of legal record. The fight seemed to drain out of Vivian all at once. She slumped against the desk, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. What am I supposed to do now? She whispered. Henry's expression softened slightly. That, Vivian, is entirely up to you. But it won't be here, and it won't be with my money or influence to protect you. As Henry led a shell-shocked Vivian from the room, I felt Elliot's arms encircle me from behind. It's over, he murmured into my hair. I turned in his embrace, meeting his gaze. No, I said softly. It's just beginning. As we rejoined the gala, the weight of the past months finally lifting, I realized that this victory wasn't just about exposing Vivian or saving Elliot's business. It was about reclaiming our lives, our relationship, and our future, together. 6 months after the gala that changed everything, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my dress. The Woman of the Year award ceremony was tonight, and my nerves were on edge. You look stunning, Elliot said, appearing behind me. He wrapped his arms around my waist, pressing a kiss to my shoulder. I leaned into his embrace, marveling at how far we'd come. The months following Vivian's downfall had been challenging, but they'd also been transformative. We'd attended couples therapy, rebuilding our trust and communication one session at a time. Elliot had thrown himself into revitalizing his business, while I'd taken on a permanent role at Blackwood Industries, working closely with Henry to implement new ethical guidelines. Ready to go? Elliot asked, offering his arm. As we entered the grand ballroom, I was struck by how different it felt from that fateful night 6 months ago. The air was charged with positivity and celebration, not tension and deceit. Henry approached us, beaming. Clara, Elliot. So good to see you both. We chatted easily, the awkwardness of our past entanglements long gone. Henry had become not just a mentor, but a friend. Clara, he said, his tone growing serious. I wanted to thank you again. What you did, it wasn't just about exposing Vivian. It was a wake-up call for me, for the whole company. We're better for it. I squeezed his arm. Thank you, Henry. That means more than you know. As the ceremony began, I felt Elliot's hand slip into mine. The presenter took the stage, her voice ringing out clear and strong. This year's Woman of the Year award goes to someone who exemplifies integrity, resilience, and leadership. Someone who, in the face of personal and professional challenges, chose to take the high road. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating Clara Sinclair. The room erupted in applause. In a daze, I made my way to the stage, accepting the award with shaking hands. "Thank you," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "This past year has taught me so much about strength, about forgiveness, and about the power of truth." As I spoke, my eyes found Elliot in the crowd. His face shone with pride and love. We all face moments that test us, that make us question everything we thought we knew. But it's in those moments that we discover who we truly are. I thought of Vivian, last I'd heard working at a small nonprofit, slowly rebuilding her life away from the glitz and manipulation of her past. This award isn't just for me. It's for everyone who's ever had to fight for what's right, even when it's hard. It's for those who choose love and honesty over ego and deceit. As I concluded my speech to thunderous applause, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. The drama, the pain, the uncertainty, it was all behind us now. Later that night, Elliot and I stood on our balcony, the city lights twinkling below. I leaned against him, the award sitting on the table beside us. "I'm so proud of you," he murmured, his arms tightening around me. "I'm proud of us," I replied. We could have let all of this tear us apart. Instead, it made us stronger. Elliot turned me to face him, his eyes serious. "Clara, I know we've been through hell and back, but I want you to know, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You're not just my wife, you're my partner, my best friend, my rock." Tears pricked my eyes as he continued. "I fall in love with you more every day. And I promise, from this day forward, no more secrets, no more doubts. Just us, facing whatever comes next together." As we sealed his words with a kiss, I felt a profound sense of peace. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but we'd weathered the storm. We'd emerged not just intact, but stronger, wiser, and more in love than ever. The drama with Vivian, the betrayals and doubts, they were chapters in our story, but they didn't define us. What defined us was this moment, and all the moments to come. A future built on trust, respect, and an unshakable bond. As we turned to go inside, hand in hand, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together. And that was the greatest victory of all.